Econolite. Moving traffic forward.
In this tutorial, we're going to go through some of the more advanced features on the zones for Supervisor. In the Zones Explorer, you'll see a listing of the various zones and the outputs and displays associated with them. For instance, on the right zone here, you notice we have the display and output for vehicle presence as well as for bike and so forth. Let's suppose we wanted to use one of the new features such as the pulse output. Pulse output, say, to this zone so that we could enable counts in the controller. Through one here, what we'll do is go to this add condition box or plus sign here, and you'll have new conditions, and what we can do is add a pulse. And so it says pulse in through one, set the output, put it on a different output pin, and now you can monitor output or input 18 on the controller and do counts through that, and you'll have a pulse every time cars travel through this zone. When they leave the zone, it will put a pulse out. Another option is to do a snappy detector. Let's do it on this zone here. This is the through number 2. Again, the plus sign. I can put snappy, and the snappy requires you to monitor phase. And if I click right here on that little drop down, I tell it it's associated with phase 2, and let's put that output on some other output here. And what the snappy does is it acts as a presence detector while the phase is red, and then when the phase is green and the cars are flowing through, it acts as a pulse output. So it's sort of 2 in 1. Something we've had in previous Autoscope products. The third advanced option is to be able to use phase color. So let's do something here. I'm going to right click and add an advanced zone back on the left turn lane, put it back 250 feet. And so we've got another zone back here. And now what we'll do is on this left turn lane here, I'm going to add some logic. And what we'll do is we'll tie in phase color to this logic. So I'm going to use the phase color option. And what I'm going to do is set up a condition where this will only call the left turn protected when there's a certain occupancy, when both these are occupied and it's on phase red. So the drop down next to phase, I can say which phase this is and then the state. And we're going to say on during red. The output that we want associated that is the same as the left turn. So we want that phase to be set to output 5, same as our left. And then this new zone that was set up, that one, we want that one to be on number 5 as well. And if we want to name this, call this left advanced. There we go. So now that sets up what we'll do in the Actions Explorers, where we work on combining outputs or setting the logic. So now you'll notice on output number 5, I've got 3 conditions. The vehicle presence in the left that we had before. We have the phase color, which we added for phase state on during red for phase 2. Actually, this should be phase 5. I made a mistake before. And then of course the third condition is the vehicle presence for the advanced. Now all I have to do is click the OR. The default is OR for any multiple things tied to an output, and it creates an AND condition. So now I've created an AND of these 2 zones with phase color. So there's an option or an example of using logic in the advanced settings. The next feature I want to show is how you can set some advanced options on each output. If I click to the left of the set output statement here, you'll see a drop down, and then we can enable output options. Now we'll monitor phase 2 here, again assuming you either have the SDLC connection or a red-green interface panel. Then we can set the contrast loss recall options, and this is really handy because most systems default with just a maximum recall if there's a contrast loss. but that could be very inefficient, especially on a left turn, for instance, or a side street that doesn't have a lot of vehicles. Rather, for each of these outputs, you can put a fixed time and specify exactly the amount of time that you think will cause the intersection to work most efficiently with just a recall. Or you could also do minimum. We've had a lot of customers that have minimal impact when there's contrast loss due to heavy fog or things like that. Also, we can do an extend on green or delay on red just by simply typing in the amount of seconds that you want to extend or delay on. So that's how you get the enable those extra output options. Next is you can put LEDs on the screen to indicate when the outputs are turning on to the controller. And if it's a pulse output, for instance, we have this pulse here, I could turn on the LED for the pulse output. And the difference between the LED for the output and this specific zone itself is that the zone will turn on, but the output may not, depending on, for instance, here if there's logic associated. So you would be able to see whichever one you want. Lastly, under video overlays, you can show the time and the name of the intersection, the firmware version on the screen, add just a basic static message, whatever you want to type there, and a phase label. Very handy to be able to monitor the signal and its changing states, tell it what load switch to monitor, and then you'll be able to see that again with communication back to the controller. And that's it for the advanced setup options.